Since 2015, the Pittsburgh Pirates franchise has not had a lot of success at the major league level. After a 2015 season that saw them win 98 games, they've only finished over 500 one time in the past 9 years since. They've gone through a few different rebuilds with a few different regimes, and the latest one has set their sights on a brand new direction for this Pirates franchise. This rebuild, led by guys like Paul Skenes, Jared Jones, Oneil Cruz, and Bryan Reynolds, is definitely trending in the right direction, although it has yet to lead to major league success. Let's dive into the 2025 Pittsburgh Pirates organization. Before I get into these team ranks, I want you to know that everything here is completely objective. My formula for these rankings are going to be in the description of this video. And we'll start off with a 21st ranked Major League roster, really held back by a lineup that ranked 27th, but a solid rotation led by Paul Skenes, Jared Jones, and Mitch Keller really had them on the upswing this season. We didn't even get full years out of Skenes and Jones, and it still did really help the rotation ranks this year. Their Major League bullpen was 24th alongside their defense, and the Pirates made a couple moves to shore up that bullpen, but also traded away a few pieces from that group. Alongside the young talent that's already in the majors, the farm system is definitely another positive for this group. Led by some of the best pitchers in the entire minor leagues, they've seen their rank climb all the way up to 4th in the entire minor leagues. They have a few minor league hitters that are solid, although not the high-end potential guys that some organizations have, but they do have some guys that will contribute to this major league team very soon. Going right away into this brain trust, your manager here is Derek Shelton. He's been with Pittsburgh his entire career as the manager. 294 and 414 overall record, a 415 winning percentage here. This will be his 6th season. General manager Ben Cherington, also his 6th season. He came in at the same time as Derek Shelton. A guy who's been around Major League Baseball for a majority of his life, and one who's had success running a front office before. Last season, the Pirates were 76 and 86. They had the same record in 2023 as well. Last place in the National League Central and 12th place in the National League. Their payroll has always been a big question for them. $84 million last year. That put them at 29th in baseball. This season, actually a step back in that area as well, projected a $75 million payroll, so they're not really spending a lot of money on their major league product, although they did bring a couple guys in this offseason. The PECOTA projections has them again at 76 and 86, their 2025 playoff odds at 6.2%. So although they are in one of the weaker divisions in baseball, they don't see a big lane for success for Pittsburgh in 2025. Another huge bright spot for Pittsburgh moving forward is their top 100 draft capital this year. 4 picks in the top 100, 6, 50, 73, and 82. In a pretty solid draft, Pittsburgh should be able to beef up that farm system even more that's already ranked 9th in all of baseball. 3 guys here on the top contracts list and 3 guys that they've already extended. Mitch Keller, $15.4 million. Bryan Reynolds, $13.3. Ke'Bryan Hayes, $8.75 million. So Pittsburgh has went out and extended some of their guys instead of spending that money in free agency. I mentioned they haven't made the playoffs since 2015. That was a 1-game wildcard series that they ended up losing. Their park factor, which is a number that measures if your park is a hitting or a pitching park. League average is 100. The Pirates are here at 101, making PNC Park the 8th biggest hitting park in all of baseball. That'll play into things like weighted runs created plus. Organization success in the minor leagues. Indianapolis Indians last year at 77 and 70 had a pretty solid group. Greensboro Grasshoppers were great, the high A team last year, 75 and 55. The Altoona Curve in AA, 62 and 76, and A-Ball, 54 and 77 for the Bradenton Marauders. For me this season, in terms of storylines, how far can your solid rotation carry you? Paul Skenes is a Cy Young favorite in the National League. Jared Jones and Mitch Keller, both great pitchers. Just added a 2-WAR guy from last season and Andrew Heaney in free agency, and then Bailey Falter will shore up the rest of that rotation. They have some solid names that might come up and give them innings this year. How good can that rotation be, and how much can they help out Pittsburgh in terms of wins? A bounce-back bullpen is definitely needed in 2025 for Pittsburgh to have success, specifically David Bednar, one of the best closers in baseball the past few years before last season. A huge step back for him last year. A couple of other guys in the bullpen can definitely take steps forward for this crew. How can that bullpen do in 2025? And then finally, kind of a more general one for their offense, but the offensive philosophy, I think, is a big talking point for Pittsburgh. They brought in a few new guys in terms of coaches for this offense, and we've seen a couple differences in how players have gone about at-bats in recent years, specifically Ke'Bryan Hayes. His season last year was much different than the seasons before. How will this new offensive philosophy shape the lineup, and can they be an above-average lineup this season? An organization that isn't known as big spenders, one that made a lot of one-year signings this offseason. Andrew Heaney, 1 year, $5.25 million, really a big one for their rotation to give him a lot of innings. Tommy Pham, 1 year, $4.025. He'll be starting this year. And then Ferguson and Mesa will end up being in the bullpen. Adam Frazier as a utility guy, 1 year, $1.53. Welcome back to Pittsburgh. The big one here, Spencer Horwitz, brought over from Cleveland after he spent all of last year with Toronto. Projected to be their first baseman, currently dealing with a bit of an injury. We'll see how that hampers his performance, but he will be a big part of this 2025 offense for Pittsburgh. Some big subtractions for the team. Yasmani Grandal, still currently a free agent, 1.4 WAR last season. Aroldis Chapman and Luis Ortiz out of that bullpen. Ortiz traded to Cleveland. Chapman walked to Boston in free agency. Connor Joe over to San Diego. And then Marco Gonzales, a guy who gave him some innings last year, still a free agent, 0.2 WAR in 2024. I'll go over a few of these numbers quick on the screen. WOBA stands for weighted on base average. Think of it as a different form of on base percentage, but everything is weighted, meaning a home run weighs more than a triple, which weighs more than a double. League average is 310. A rule of thumb for that, if it would be a good on-base percentage, it would be a good WOBA. Weighted runs created plus, another number. League average for that is 100. Everything above or below that is the percent better or worse that you are compared to league average. And that's just a general offensive stat to capture all of your offensive productivity. A really interesting lineup here. A few guys that have been around for a while, but a lot of veterans as well. Only 3 guys with less than 3 years of service time. Tommy Pham leading it off in left field. Brought in free agency. Projected 9 homers this year, 0.4 WAR. Bryan Reynolds really been your guy in center and left field the past couple of years. He's shifting over to right, currently projected by Fangraphs. They have him being 14% better than league average this year, 22 homers, 2.4 WAR. Oneil Cruz, really your young superstar on the rise on this offense. 26 homers projected, 3.3 WAR. He'll be in center field. The boy McCutchen is back again at DH. He'll be here. He can still contribute offensively. One of the best players in franchise history for them. Spencer Horwitz, not currently listed in the Fangraphs lineup. I have him here because he's projected to be out there for a majority of the season. Again, he'll start off on the injured list most likely. 19% better than league average, projected 10 homers, under 2 WAR. Joey Bart, a big breakout catcher, former top prospect with San Francisco, came over and had a great season for Pittsburgh last year. Nick Gonzales, another one of their young guys, prospect coming through their ranks. 320 WOBA projected, 2.3 WAR. Brian Hayes, guy who they gave a huge extension a few years ago, really took a big step back last year offensively, but a great defender at third base. IKF at shortstop, kind of a stopgap guy until they can bring another one up for a bit. He still will give you some value, 1.3 WAR. On the bench, projected Endy Rodriguez, Jared Triolo, Adam Frazier, and Josh Palacios. In parentheses on the bench is going to be your projected WAR for the 2025 season. Paul Skenes here to lead off the rotation, the number 1 pick in the 2023 draft. One of the best pitchers in baseball, if not already the best. Projected just over a 3 ERA, 30.5% K rate, and under 5 WAR this year. A great pitcher, one that you expect to give you Cy Young numbers if he can stay out there all season. Mitch Keller has been a guy who's been here for a while for Pittsburgh, really an innings eater at bare minimum. He's a guy who's going to go out there and give you innings every single year, but 2 decent results most of the time. 4.14 ERA projected, just under 2.5 WAR. Jared Jones also projected the same WAR. He'll do it a bit differently though, get more strikeouts, a lower ERA, not as many innings. He's under 3 years of service time as well as rookie year last year. Andrew Heaney brought over as a starter, the only longtime vet in this rotation. He's a lefty, 4.51 projected ERA and 1.1 WAR. He had 1.8 WAR last season. Bailey Falter, 124 innings, 4.49 ERA, just under 1 WAR projected. A couple other guys that could give you some run in the majors this year. A couple big prospects here. Braxton Ashcraft, Mike Burrows, Bubba Chandler, and Thomas Harrington are some guys to watch for this rotation in 2025. The bullpen, while not a bright spot last year, does have some solid names in it. David Bednar, they project to take a big leap forward after what he put out there last year. 3.71 ERA, 25.5% K rate. He'll be your closer. Dennis Santana, a high leverage pitcher listed by Fangraphs, under a 4 ERA as well. Colin Holderman will give you under a 4 ERA projected again. Carmen Modzinski, a 4.07 projected ERA. He had a good year last year for Pittsburgh. Caleb Ferguson and Tim Mesa are your lefties in this bullpen. alongside Joey Wentz, who will give you some long innings this season. Kyle Nicholas, another decent year last year. A lot of guys that the projections actually do like a lot more this season. Ferguson projected much higher than the results that he had last year. An interesting group, a pretty young group, but one that should take a step forward, I think, in 2025. So before I go into these breakdowns, I'll give you some of the numbers. The OFF, BSR, and DEF are just going to be your run values as listed by Fangraphs. Those will be ranked in percentiles compared to the rest of the league. If there's an NQ, that means he didn't have enough appearances to qualify for it. Your righty and lefty splits. On the cards, your WAR per 22 since 162 / weighted runs created plus WOBA, homers and steals, games played. Weighted runs created plus average, again, 100, WOBA 310. And then your baseball Savant page is going to have some expected stats like WOBA, batting average, and slug, your hard hit numbers, and your plate discipline numbers alongside your defense and running stats. So we'll start off with Joey Bart, a guy that came over to Pittsburgh and was really solid for them last year. 21% better than league average offensively, a 347 WOBA, 13 homers in just 80 games. A really solid second half of the season for Bart outside of a bit of a down September. The July and August OPS at 824 and 876. Really crushed lefties last season to a 996 OPS, 5 homers against them in just 74 plate appearances. A bit worse against righties, but still above league average. I mentioned him as a guy with pedigree. He was the number 2 overall pick in the 2018 draft by the San Francisco Giants. Some of the numbers don't like him as much as what he gave last year, but there are definitely some solid signs here. The xWOBA is still relatively high, even though it is a bit lower than his WOBA. We might expect that to come down a little bit, but that would still have him land in a pretty solid place. Doesn't hit the ball necessarily at a great launch angle. The launch angle sweet spot percent is the amount of time that you hit the ball between 8 and 24 degrees, or the sweet spot of the launch angle. He doesn't do it as often. That's something that if he raises it could help a lot of his other stats. He will whiff and strike out a decent amount, but he walks at just below a league average rate. Really solid catcher offensively. Defensively, not great. Blocking, framing, and pop time all a bit below average, although he does throw out some runners in the 18th percentile in fielding run value last year by Baseball Savant. Base running, doesn't like him as much, but just a -1 run value. Pretty solid catcher, but one that just really had his first success in the majors last year. Let's see what his 2025 looks like, because it could be a lot different. So Endy Rodriguez here last season was not up in the majors with the Pirates. He was one of my guys as a prospect, a switch hitter who has really solid minor league stats. Just got run in 2023. Some of the things did really like him. A really good thrower behind the plate. His pop time is up there, caught stealing above average up there. Not as good in blocks above average and framing, but he is just about league average in those ranks. Was limited by injuries last season, played only 10 games in the minors last year. Hopefully this is a good bounce back year for Endy Rodriguez. I think he's a really solid prospect, still just 25 years old. I'll also mention Henry Davis and Jason DeLay as guys that can catch here, although Henry Davis does play more outfield now. A good offensive catching group here in Pittsburgh, but not one of the better defensive groups in baseball. Although currently listed as the first base starter on Fangraphs is DJ Stewart because of the injury to Spencer Horwitz. I believe he's going to play a majority of the season there at first base, so I'm going to go into a deep dive on him instead. Pittsburgh saw first base as a place of weakness for them last year, and they really went after a guy who was solid for Toronto last season. 790 OPS and 12 homers in 381 plate appearances. The numbers really liked him. His WOBA right around his xWOBA number, which was really solid. Really good profile in terms of strikeouts and walks, and that's something that you love to see. He can hit the ball a bit harder as well, and I think that's where he takes his next step forward as a hitter. He can also play some outfield. He played some with Toronto last season. 2 big splits for him. He was much better against righties than lefties last year, although he wasn't really given much of an opportunity, only 81 plate appearances against them. And then the pre-All-Star number, 880 OPS, 125 plate appearances. In the second half, a 746 OPS, so a bit of a step back there, but still above league average. He brings you a lot defensively at first base too, which is definitely a plus. Not a great base runner, but he's a guy that the Pirates went after and they wanted to acquire him. Won't be a free agent until 2031, so this is your first baseman of the future for Pittsburgh. I'll mention quickly on DJ Stewart, a really good 2023, 839 OPS and 11 homers with the Mets. Last season, not great, 622 OPS. Does walk a lot, doesn't chase a lot, can't hit the ball hard. If he starts the season as the first baseman, you think an okay option to hold you over until Horwitz comes back. So Nick Gonzales here at second base for Pittsburgh. He's one of your guys from the past rebuild. 2020 draft, 7th overall pick. A pretty solid player, a bit under league average offensively last year, but he does a lot of things defensively that you like, and he's way up there in sprint speed. The big red flags for him, he doesn't walk very often at 4.7%, and he will chase a decent amount, 34.1% of the time, but he has really good bat-to-ball skills. 84th percentile in expected batting average last year. A lot of the other numbers on Savant are right about league average, and when you can bring that much defensively, that's a big plus for a second baseman. Good minor league numbers for Gonzales, so you think there could be another step there offensively. If he cuts the chases down by a decent amount, I think that can really help him out. But a really good contact bat at second base who brings you a lot defensively. A solid second baseman and one with prospect pedigree for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So at third base, you have Ke'Bryan Hayes, a bit of a big topic here for the Pirates. He was a pretty good offensive player in 2023, 762 OPS, 15 homers, 10 steals. Last season, didn't have the full run, dealt with some injuries, but he took a huge step back offensively. 2nd% in batting run value at third base, negative 21 batting runs last year. The biggest thing for him, he had always been a guy who hits the ball pretty hard. 2023, 93rd percentile in average exit velocity, 85th in a hard hit rate. 2024, 46th percentile in average exit velocity. The hard hit rate went down to 65%. Wasn't really getting any barrels last year and wasn't hitting the ball in advantageous launch angles. The short of it for Hayes, he's one of the best defenders that you have at third base in baseball. So no matter what he gives you offensively, he's going to be above average. He'll get a couple stolen bases here and there as well. Not the greatest arm, but the range is incredible at third base. 2023, 17 outs above average. Last season, 6. That puts him in the 90th percentile last year. A guy who doesn't strike out a lot, but doesn't really walk a lot either. 10th percentile in 23, you see on the screen in 24. A guy who I really thought was trending in the right direction offensively in his age 27 season in 2023. Last year, again, a lot of injuries really held him back, I think, from being the hitter that he could be. But a huge step back for him last season on the offensive side, and that's something you can't really ignore. He's a huge X factor for this lineup. If he can give you what he gave you in 2023, you have a much better lineup. If he gave you what you got last year, you're back into those 27th, 28th ranks in baseball. Again, we'll see what Ke'Bryan Hayes can give you offensively, but a great defensive player at third base. Isiah Kiner-Falefa, IKF here at shortstop, 28 years old, 1.7 WAR per 162. So a valuable player. He gives you pretty good range at shortstop. Won't strike out a lot, but doesn't walk a lot, doesn't really hit the ball hard. He's never been really an above average offensive player. He's just going to give you solid defense at short and go out there and make contact. Brought him over last season at the trade deadline. He'll be a free agent after this year. I think he's more of a stopgap until Pittsburgh figure out a long-term option here at shortstop. But again, 73rd percentile base running, 73rd in defense. Hits righties above league average. He can be a valuable player for this team. Tommy Pham brought over on a one-year deal this offseason to play left field. Another righty bat, 91 weighted runs created plus last year, 9 homers and 7 steals in 116 games. Was with Kansas City last year and played a lot for that playoff team. 2023, a really good year for him. 774 OPS, 16 homers and 22 steals. A lot of red on the Baseball Savant page. Average exit velocity, hard hit rate, chase rate, expected batting average, and expected WOBA, all in the 80th percentile or higher. A guy who's definitely in the back end of his career, though, 37 years old. Not exactly the high ceiling signing that you want to see Pittsburgh have this offseason, but he definitely is another bat that can help and kind of a veteran presence to this team. Still has a good arm in the outfield. The chase rate's pretty good. Not going to strike out a lot. If anything, could be a trade piece for Pittsburgh at the deadline. Will give you some things in terms of bat-to-ball presence in this lineup, but I would expect him not really to have a great season offensively, maybe a bit closer to what we saw last year, but that's not really a negative for this team. 1 WAR per 162 since 2022. Getting his first full season in center field this year is going to be Oneil Cruz, really valuable player, 3.5 WAR per 162 since he's been up, 21 homers and 22 steals last year in 146 games. He's going to hit the ball harder than literally anybody in the entire league except for maybe Giancarlo Stanton. 26 years old. Look at those barrel rates, average exit velocity, hard hit rate. I mean, the bat speed is in the 100th percentile. Actually underperformed a decent amount of his expected stats here as well. I mean, a really fun bat, a really fun young player. He was a bit below average in center field last year, but an incredible arm. He came up as a shortstop, played a lot of shortstop for Pittsburgh in the majors. But I think they do see him as a long-term outfield or maybe corner infield option. You know, he's a 6'7" dude. You don't see a lot of guys like that at shortstop. 93rd percentile base running last year for him too. I think he can give you more offensively. The strikeouts were definitely the big issue for him last year. You see the whiff rate and K rate in the bottom 10th percentile in baseball. Took a bit of a step forward last season against lefties, but he's always going to hit righties really well. Not a free agent until 2029. He's really the next guy in maybe the crop that's going to get extended on this team. But one of the more fun players to watch in the entire league, an absolute missile when the ball hits his barrel. Oneil Cruz is your 2025 center fielder for the Buccos. One of the more consistent and solid players in the outfield offensively here for Pittsburgh. Bryan Reynolds, 30 years old. 2.5 WAR per 162. He's going to be about 20% better than league average almost every single year that he's out there. 24 homers, 10 steals, 156 games for him. The problem with him, really bad defensively last year. Did play a lot of center field for the Pirates in the past, but is now kind of shifted to a corner outfielder. Fangraphs list him as the current right fielder. He was in the first percentile in defensive run value as well. So while he is a really good offensive player, the defense really struggles and that hurts him in terms of WAR. Maybe a shift to right field full-time could help him over there. Really, the only knock on him offensively is the whiff rate is a bit low, but everything else is league average or higher, really. The xWOBA, x-batting average, x-slug, all around 15th percentile best in baseball. A good switch hitter in this lineup and someone that needs to take a bit of a step defensively if he really wants to unlock that full potential, but 30 years old, slotting in as your right fielder for the Pirates in 2025. In 24, an 834 OPS first half, 718 second half. So if we see that first half come back, get those numbers again, you feel really good about Bryan Reynolds this season. One of the timeless GOATs in baseball, Andrew McCutchen, 38 years old, and he's still kicking offensively, man. 105 weighted runs created plus last season, 20 homers in just 120 games. Still does a lot of things really well. The discipline is great. The chase rate in the 100th percentile. He's definitely picked that up from how long he's played in the majors. The walk rate is still up there. He's above average in a few things. Still the bat speed, which is incredible given his age, is still in the upper half of baseball. He'll hit the ball in the barrel. He'll give you some home runs every single season for sure. A 775 OPS in 2023, but a bit less in the home runs. So he hit more homers last year, but the overall offense wasn't as good. Got better as the season went on. A 791 OPS in the second half, which is crazy for a guy of his age. One of the best players in franchise history, Andrew McCutchen, is your DH in 2025. On this bench here for Pittsburgh, Triolo's really valuable defensively, 1.7 WAR per 162. Not going to give you a ton of offense, just 72 weighted runs created plus last season. Did have 9 homers and 8 steals in 125 games. Frazier has turned into a utility guy, a former all-star with the Pirates that was traded a couple years ago. Bounced around to a couple teams. He's 33 years old. Did not have a good season offensively last year, but was about league average in 2023. A second baseman by trade that can play a bit of corner outfield. Joshua Palacios, 29 years old. He'll give you a bit more here offensively than the other guys. 2 homers and 1 steal, only 23 games last year in the majors for Pittsburgh. Not a great group offensively off the bench, but a group that will give you some value defensively. Frazier can play everywhere, and that really helps him in terms of value. Palacios and Triolo over 1 WAR per 162. DJ Stewart, again, I'll also mention as a guy who you'll probably see on this roster to start the season. An interesting mix in this lineup for Pittsburgh. Hopefully they can take a step forward this season. So before I get into the pitching side here, on the right side will be run values again, pitching run value, fastball run value, breaking and off-speed run values. I'll give you your starts, innings, ERA, and FIP last season, FIP, fielding, independent pitching. Stuff and location plus here are also going to be on the bottom. Those are 2 models built by Eno Saris at Fangraphs. Really just a measure of how good your stuff is as a pitcher and how good you are at locating pitches. League average for that is 100. Again, anything above or below is going to be the percent better or worse that you are compared to league average. And then I'll have the pitches on the bottom, miles per hour, and the usage for those pitches. We'll get it started here with Paul Skenes, the number 1 pick in the 2023 draft. An absolute stud. He's been incredible everywhere that he's been. Under a 2 ERA last year in 133 innings for Pittsburgh. Didn't even get a full season and had 4.3 wins above replacement. Both the stuff and location for him is 10% better than league average. The fastball was incredible last year, 99th percentile. You see all the red on the screen. xERA, X batting average, walk rate, K rate, hard hit rate, ground ball rate, everything is good for Skenes. This is the Cy Young favorite in the National League, and he is that for good reason. The craziest thing about him, I think, is he's still developing a couple of these secondary pitches, and they were still great. The slider is really the only pitch that got hit last year. The fastball had a 24.2% whiff rate. You don't see that very often from a fastball in baseball. The sinker for him, 29% whiff rate, curveball over 30. The slider, even though it got hit, it was over 30. The changeup, 55% whiff rate on the pitch. This is a guy that literally does every single thing well as a pitcher, only 22 years old, really a guy with no ceiling at all. If he's able to avoid injuries and be out there for a full year, I think there's no question he's your Cy Young winner in the National League. A guy who's on a Hall of Fame trajectory, and yes, only 22 years old, I say that, but one who's on a Hall of Fame trajectory, one of the best pitchers in baseball, if not the best. Mitch Keller is going to be your big innings guy out of this rotation, and he's been really valuable for Pittsburgh the last few years. 2.4 WAR per season, 178 innings last year, about league average in stuff and location. A solid fastball for him last year. The breaking and off-speed pitches weren't as good. He's a guy that throws 7 pitches. You don't see that very often. 4-seamer, sinker, sweeper, cutter, curveball, slider, and changeup, although he doesn't throw that changeup very often. Last few seasons, 31, 32, and 31 games pitched, 178, 194, 159 on the innings, 4.25, 4.21, and 3.91 on the ERA. You really know what you're getting out of Mitch Keller at this point. A pitcher who will give you value, he'll give you innings, pretty solid results, but not gangbusters results. Still just 24 years old, even though he's been in the majors a while for Pittsburgh. A really solid pitcher here for Pittsburgh and your innings guy. The fastball took a bit of a step back in terms of how it was hit last year. 61st percentile run value compared to being in the 80s the past 2 years. I think that's really what is going to help or hurt him this season. If he can get that fastball back to a positive pitch for him, he ends up getting those 3.91s or early 4 ERAs, but a real solid number 2 to have for Pittsburgh. Jared Jones, another real fun one here for Pittsburgh, a 4.FIP, 4.14 ERA last year. The fastball was well above average for him, only 22 starts, 121.2 innings. Didn't get a full season from him again. I think if we get a full season, we're going to see a lot of value out of him. Fastball in the top 10th percentile in baseball. He gets a lot of whiffs, a lot of strikeouts. He will give up some hard contact. That barrel rate and hard hit rate are pretty low. But a former top prospect for Pittsburgh, a second-round pick in 2020 out of high school, still just 23 years old. The curveball got hit pretty hard last season, but it was definitely a worse pitch than expected. A 5.08 WOBA compared to a 4.11 xWOBA. While that number is still high, if that comes down, you think the results get a lot better. A really solid fastball for Jared Jones. He'll throw that about 50% of the time. A real high upside young pitcher, and another one that you could think could develop into one of the upper echelon pitchers in our game. 102 stuff plus, 105 location plus last season. Andrew Heaney, a real recent pickup for Pittsburgh. 95 stuff plus, but really located his pitches last year. A 4.04 FIP, the ERA a bit higher. He gave you 160 innings last year, 33 years old. A former top prospect who really turned his career around the past couple seasons. 32 and 34 appearances the last 2 years. A 4.15 ERA in 2023. In 22, a 3.10 ERA in 14 starts. The numbers really liked him. When Heaney is on, he's getting a lot of strikeouts. He was in the 97th percentile of strikeout rate in 2022. His off-speed pitches have really jumped up in terms of run value the last year, but his breaking pitches took a bit of a step back. Traded some of his strikeout ability last year to walk less guys. Definitely a step forward for him in terms of walks. The results didn't really like him as much though, but still 159 strikeouts last year. A guy who will go out and give you starts, and that's going to bring a lot of value for this rotation. Another innings guy here is the 5 starter for Pittsburgh. He is not on the same level as the other 4 guys here, but still came out and gave you innings last year. 4.3 FIP and a 4.43 ERA are not terrible. The stuff and location are a bit below league average. The expected numbers really didn't like his year, but the fastball was very solid for him. Both the sinker and 4-seam have really good numbers. The slider and curve both got hit a pretty decent amount, and that really hampered him from being a good pitcher. did make 28 starts for the Pirates last year. He's your 5 starter. I would expect some of the guys from the minors to come up and maybe take this spot over the year. But for now, barely Falter is the 5 starter for Pittsburgh, 27 years old and a lefty here at the end of the rotation. Getting into this bullpen, 2 guys that had really solid seasons in 2024 and one that took a huge step back from the pitcher he used to be. David Bednar, great stuff last year, really couldn't locate his pitches as he wanted to, and he got rocked. 5.77 ERA and 4.8 FIP over 57.2 innings. The last 2 seasons for him, a 2 and a 2.61 ERA as a closer for Pittsburgh. 2023, a ton of red on that Savant page. Expected ERA, batting average, chase rate, all in the top 5th percentile in baseball. But last year, walked a ton of guys, gave up a lot of hard contact, didn't get the ball on the ground. He was getting some strikeouts, but just didn't get the results that you want to see out of David Bednar. He's got to take a step forward back to where he was in 2023 for the end of this bullpen to be successful. Outside of him, we have Dennis Santana, kind of a good story for Pittsburgh, and he had really good results last year. Chase rate 98th percentile, and then top 10th percentile in barrel rate and hard hit rate alongside average exit velocity. A guy with a great fastball, 85th percentile in fastball run value. The off-speed lagged behind a bit, but overall about 70th percentile in pitching run value last year. Colin Holderman, a 3.16 ERA, although the FIP didn't really like him as much. The stuff was great, but really didn't locate his pitches. That's really a trend with these 3 guys here. A high-speed fastball, 92nd percentile in velo. Good average exit velocity numbers. Did get some strikeouts and whiffs, but again, walked a lot of guys. The barrel rate was in the bottom 5th percentile in baseball alongside that. The expected ERA of 4.17 is about a whole point above that ERA. He did give you a decent amount of innings last year, but didn't see that expected number catch up with him. 3 solid guys here at the back of this bullpen, but kind of a question mark, I think. Bednar and Holderman need to work on cutting those walks down. Santana had a great season last year. It's going to be an interesting back of this bullpen to see what they can do in 2025. Leading off the rest of this bullpen, Carmen Ladzinski had really solid numbers last year. Limits barrels in the top 1st percentile in all of baseball. Not a huge strikeout or walk guy. He's going to put the ball into play, but mostly soft contact. 50 really good innings for him last year. Caleb Ferguson brought over in the offseason to be a lefty in this pen. Didn't get great results last year, but the expected numbers liked him a lot better. A guy who had a 3.43 ERA in 23, a 1.82 in 2022. Doesn't give up a ton of hard contact again, and he will strike some guys out. The walks were an issue with him last year. Kyle Nicholas, a hard-throwing righty, 97.4 on the fastball velo. Walks a lot of guys as well. Doesn't get as many chases and gave up some hard contact last year. A good season because he got a lot of whiffs on his pitches and had a very solid fastball in the 50th percentile in pitching run value last year. Tim Meza, a bounce-back candidate lefty, a 6.33 ERA and 42.2 innings, but the season before that, 2023, a 1.52 in 53.1 innings. Another guy who limits hard contact, 94th percentile in barrel rate in 2023, gets the ball on the ground when he's right to 97th percentile in ground ball rate. And then finally, Joey Wentz, brought over from Detroit, was mostly a starter in 2023, started 19 games for the Tigers. Last season, a 4.68 ERA as a reliever, but the expected ERA was at 3.70, gets some whiffs, will walk a lot of guys again, but doesn't give up as much hard contact. A big theme with this bullpen is they walk a lot of guys, but they don't give up a lot of hard contact and can get strikeouts. Can they cut those walk rates in 2025? Because if they can, they will definitely become an above average bullpen, but that's a big question mark for them going into this season. Going into top prospects, all of the numbers here are going to be on the 2080 prospect scale. For Pittsburgh, a really solid group. Number 7 in the top 100, Bubba Chandler, a right-handed pitcher. Got up to AAA last year. Great stats. 3.10 FIP, a 3.08 ERA, 120 innings. A guy who has a great fastball, an above average slider, a good changeup, and good control. Still working on developing a 4th pitch. Man, if he can get there, he becomes a top end option as a starter. A former two-way player, got drafted in the 3rd round and converted to strictly a pitcher. I think they made a really good decision. I would definitely expect Chandler to get up to the majors and contribute to this team this year. Going over to the number 2 prospect here in Connor Griffin, the 9th overall pick in the draft last season. Plus power, plus run, plus field, plus arm. If he can develop that hit tool, he really becomes a super prospect. Already 57th in the top 100. Drafted out of high school last year. Didn't get any run because he was drafted last season, but just 18 years old. Going to be really fun to follow Connor Griffin, a shortstop prospect coming up. Finally, 74th in the top 100, Thomas Harrington, 23 years old. Another guy with incredible numbers in AAA last year, a 2.61 ERA, 4 above average pitches in the fastball, slider, cutter, and splitter, a 70 control grade by Baseball America. That has him in the upper levels of pitching prospects in terms of control. Former 36 overall pick in the 2022 draft out of Campbell University. Honestly, one of my favorite pitching prospects in the entire league. I think he has a bit of a higher ceiling than a lot of people are giving him. A dude that's had great numbers all throughout the minor leagues, just doesn't strike out as many guys as you would like to. One that I think will give you run in the majors this year, and he has been a great pitcher throughout his minor league career so far. In my opinion, a pretty good infield group led by Termarr Johnson, probably my favorite draft pick of the last 10 years. Second baseman prospect. I just love the confidence exuded from this guy. Had a pretty rocky start to his minor league career as he started off and had a pretty rough stretch, dealt with some injuries, but really did get it back this past season. 121 weighted runs created plus last year in the minors, 15 homers in 124 games alongside 22 steals, walked just under 16% of the time. The grades don't necessarily love him as much. I think he's a really high floor prospect who has shown that he's got some pop in his bat. I love Termarr Johnson. I think the future second baseman for Pittsburgh. Nick York, another prospect in the system, brought over from Boston last year. Brought up to the majors last year for Pittsburgh, 42 plate appearances, a bit below league average at an 82 weighted runs created plus, but he was great in the minors. 12 homers, 21 steals in 123 games, 27% better than league average as a hitter. Hit and power are his best tools. Wyatt Sanford, another draft guy from last year, really positive as a runner, a fielder, a good arm, and a decent hit tool. Didn't play in the minors last season for Pittsburgh because of being drafted there. Just 19 years old, the number 7 prospect. Johnny Severino, this one hurts to talk about as a Brewers fan. He was traded for Carlos Santana a couple years ago. 20 years old, got up to A-ball last year. The numbers are outrageous. 31% better than league average as a hitter in A-ball and complex league last year. 16 homers in just 84 games. I think he's going to be a fast riser in this system and somebody that I've had my eye on for a while. Dealt with some strikeout issues when he got up to A-ball, but was still an above average hitter at 116 weighted runs created plus in that league. And then finally, a catcher prospect in Omar Alfonso, number 18 prospect for Pittsburgh. Really good power tools and a decent defender behind the plate. 20% better than league average as a catcher last year, 13 homers in 110 games, and walked just under 14% of the time. Does have a bit of a strikeout issue, 26% strikeout rate last year. The lack of depth in this farm system from the outfield is a bit of a concern, but there are a couple guys here. Billy Cook, 26 years old, 12 prospect for Pittsburgh. Got up to Pittsburgh last season, was a positive, not offensively though, a 79 weighted runs created plus, but a really good defender, really helped play into that. 124 weighted runs created plus in the minors last year, 17 homers and 25 steals in 115 games. And then you got two younger guys here in Edward Florentino and Gabriel Rodriguez. Florentino, 18 years old, played in the DSL last year, a really good power tool, solid hit tool. 44% better than league average in the DSL at just 17 years old, a 20% walk rate and only an 18.9% K rate. Fun prospect to watch moving forward. And then Gabriel Rodriguez, number 26 prospect, he was signed in the free agent class this winter. 50 hit grade, 50 power grade, 60 run grade, and 50 field grade. He has yet to play any baseball in the Pirates organization, but one to watch, definitely just 17 years old, the number 26 prospect again for Pittsburgh. Even more depth in this pitcher group for Pittsburgh. Braxton Ashcraft, a really solid pitching prospect. Number 4 in their system, got up to AAA last year. 55 fastball, 60 slider, 60 curveball, and 60 control. A real hard thrower, a guy with a 2.84 ERA last year throughout AA and AAA, 73 innings. Most likely won't break camp with the team. I think they'll want to see him in AAA a bit more, only 19.1 innings there, but an 0.47 ERA in those AAA starts. I think we could see him in the majors this year, but if not, a big developmental year for Ashcraft. Second here, Levi Sterling has yet to play in the minors. Number 8 prospect was drafted last year. The fastball, curveball, and changeup are all above average pitches. The control at 60, another solid piece to watch. Hunter Barco here, a lefty. Fastball 50, slider 55, splitter 55, and above average control. Another good season last year, a 3.27 ERA, 66 innings between high A and double A, a guy who strikes out a lot of batters and doesn't walk many, 11.32 Ks per nine compared to a 3 walks per nine. Definitely a good lefty pitching prospect. Xander Muth, just 19 years old, got up to A-ball with Pittsburgh last season and crushed it. 2.31 ERA. 74 innings between Complex League and A-ball. The FIP didn't like him as much, a 4.59 FIP, but the ERA number is still pretty solid. He does have some walk issues right now to this point in his career, 6.08 walks per nine. That's something that you would like to see him fix a bit before going up to the next levels. And then finally, another lefty here in Anthony Solometo, a guy who was really solid and was ranked really high on these prospect boards, but kind of took a huge step back last season. In 70.1 innings, a 5.37 ERA, didn't get many strikeouts and walked a lot of guys. 2023, a 3.26 ERA, struck out 9.63 per nine and 3.18 walks per nine. Didn't even really seem to be a level thing with him because in double A 2 years ago, he was solid, a 3.84 FIP and good strikeout numbers. Just more of a mechanical and I think mental thing than anything. I'm hoping he can bounce back because a pretty fun pitching prospect for this Pirates organization. So a really fun projected 2028 lineup for Pittsburgh here. Mentioned a couple guys already on the Major League roster. Henry Davis has been up in the majors with the Pirates in the past. Former number 1 overall pick as a catcher, but really didn't develop much defensively there. More of a bat than anything, but hasn't gotten it going yet in the majors. He's projected to be at first base in 2028. We'll see. I think Spencer Horwitz might end up being there for the long haul. Ke'Bryan Hayes, Bryan Reynolds, and Oneil Cruz, Nick York, and Nick Gonzales all already in the majors for this team. The only other guys that haven't played in the majors yet, Endy Rodriguez didn't get much run, although he was up in 2023. Tamar Johnson, I mentioned, one of my favorite second base prospects. He would be 23 years old in 2028. Their first overall pick in the 2024 MLB draft. He would be just 21. I think definitely a bright spot of this organization is how well that they've done in recent years of drafting and finding position players that they like. Reynolds and Oneil Cruz didn't initially start in their organization, but ended up being traded over. I think they have really good scouts in terms of finding other teams' prospects to acquire in trade packages. Nick York as well wasn't with the organization. Guys like Gonzales, Henry Davis, Tamar Johnson, and Connor Griffin were all drafted by the Pirates, and I think are all going to be pretty solid players in the majors. They could use a bit more thump in this bat, I think. I would expect Horwitz to most likely be the first baseman. Henry Davis does need to get going offensively to really be a piece in this 2028 team. And Ke'Bryan Hayes, again, I mentioned, does need to take another step forward offensively after what he's done last year. Bryan Reynolds, I would almost expect to be a designated hitter. Not great defensively, we went over it. I could see Nick Gonzales maybe playing some outfield, and they could end up switching roles. But I would also, and I'm going to say this with a grain of salt, I would also expect Pittsburgh at some point to maybe sign a free agent. I'm not going to put it past the ownership group to not sign anyone as well. I think if this is the lineup that they have to roll into 2028 because they're afraid to do that, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Going on to this projected 2028 rotation, Skenes, Jones, Chandler, Keller, Harrington, and then they have Braxton Ashcraft actually as the closer here. Skenes and Jones are definitely going to be here. We hope they can lock these guys up long term. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a big-time extension from Paul Skenes coming pretty soon. I know the Pirates don't like to spend money, but they have shown that they're willing to extend the guys that they like. They've done it with Ke'Bryan Hayes and Bryan Reynolds in the past. Jared Jones should definitely be here. I would expect Bubba Chandler to be up in the majors. I think he's actually even better than a number 3 starter, but with Skenes and Jones ahead of him, there's not much room for error there. Mitch Keller as the 4 starter, I think that would be really solid. He would be 32 years old in 2028. Thomas Harrington, I mentioned, I do really like him more, I think, than a lot of other publications do. One that definitely has more talent than a number 5 starter in a major league rotation, but with the guys ahead of him, it's going to be really hard to move up. And then Braxton Ashcraft as the closer, I understand it. He does have a couple pretty solid pitches and kind of has some control issues. If he doesn't develop another pitch, or if these guys are just so good that he doesn't really have a spot, I could definitely see him being a pretty solid reliever for this group in 2028. And then finally, just some last thoughts on where this organization stands. I think I like the direction where the rebuild is going. Obviously, you have Paul Skenes, the best pitcher in baseball. They got gifted that pick at number 1 overall. I'm really hoping they end up extending him. And then some of the guys that you're bringing up specifically on the pitching side, you just love to see this group develop. I think this is going to be a successful long-term plan, although I don't know if it's going to result in the greatest success at the major league level in 2025. Their projected win total at 78, I think, is something that they could be very close to. Although they don't play in the best division in baseball, I think teams like Milwaukee and Chicago are definitely a step above them in terms of their major league talent, although they have a rotation that can go bar for bar with literally anybody in all of baseball, mostly just because of what you have at the top. I would like to see them spend some money at some point in the future, although I know that might not happen. The lineup definitely has some holes. I think that's where this team could go wrong if they're not super successful right away. But you feel good about the long-term success of Oneil Cruz, given what he's shown already in the majors. I think there's definitely some bright spots there, but I think the pitching definitely is a step ahead of the offense at this point. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you're here, please like, subscribe, everything. I'm making all these on my own, doing all the research on my own for all of this. Takes a lot of time, but I really enjoy doing it. Thank you so much for watching. This is a breakdown of the 2025 Pittsburgh Pirates organization.